The space station Nexus Prime hummed with activity as beings from across the galaxy conducted their daily business. Markets bustled with exotic goods, diplomats negotiated treaties, and merchants hawked their wares to anyone with credits to spare. Among the crowd, walked with the careful stride of someone who had learned to navigate alien customs without causing offense. At 28 standard years, possessed the unremarkable appearance that made humans blend into crowds on most civilized worlds. Average height, brown hair kept short for helmet compatibility, and the kind of weathered hands that spoke of honest work rather than privilege. His jumpsuit bore the insignia of the Terran Freight Guild, marking him as one of the countless cargo haulers who kept interstellar commerce flowing. The human paused outside's cantina, checking the data pad that contained his delivery confirmation. 3 tons of rare earth minerals from the system, successfully delivered to the mining consortium. The payment would cover his ship's maintenance costs and fuel for the next run, with enough left over for a decent meal. Simple mathematics for a simple life. The cantina's atmosphere hit him like a wall of sound and scent as he entered. Dozens of species mingled in the dimly lit space, their conversations creating a symphony of clicks, growls, and melodic tones that the universal translators struggled to process simultaneously. Found an empty table near the back and ordered something called stew, hoping it wouldn't disagree with his human digestive system. Another pathetic human, scraping by on cargo runs. The voice carried across the cantina with crystalline clarity, each word pronounced with the precise diction of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Looked up from his meal to see the speaker. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her humanoid form covered in scales that shifted from deep emerald to brilliant gold depending on how the light caught them. Her face possessed an angular beauty that spoke of predatory grace, with eyes like molten amber that seemed to catalog every weakness in those around her. Most striking were the wing membranes that extended from her arms to her torso, translucent and veined with silver. According to the whispered conversations overheard from nearby tables, scion of one of the most powerful trading dynasties in the Draconian Empire, heir to a fleet of vessels that dwarfed most planetary navies. She commanded respect through bloodline, wealth, and the casual arrogance that came with never having been anything. Look at him, continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the cantina. Eating processed slop because he cannot afford real food, wearing clothes that have seen better decades, flying some rust bucket that probably breaks down between systems. She laughed, a sound like silver bells with an edge of cruelty. This is what the great human expansion has produced, mediocrity wrapped in delusions of significance. Continued eating, though the stew had lost its flavor. He had encountered this before, the casual dismissal of humanity by species that measured worth in traditional power structures. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, lacking the ancient lineages or vast territories that commanded automatic respect. They made up for it through adaptability and stubbornness, but those qualities rarely impressed nobles at cocktail parties. The humans spread across the galaxy like a virus, went on, warming to her subject. No culture, no refinement, no understanding of proper hierarchy. They take whatever work others reject and call it freedom. They live in ships barely capable of interstellar flight and call it adventure. Her amber eyes found across the room. Tell me, cargo hauler, what glorious destiny brings you to Nexus Prime today? Did you deliver something precious? Rare isotopes, perhaps, exotic artifacts. The cantina had grown quiet, alien faces turning toward with expressions ranging from curiosity to amusement. He set down his spoon and met gaze directly. Neodymium and lithium compounds from 442b. Nothing exotic, just materials that keep your civilization's electronics functioning. How wonderfully mundane. His wings rustled with what might have been disdain. The mighty human fleet, reduced to being delivery boys for their betters. Do you at least dream of something greater, or has your species accepted its proper place as servants to those with actual vision? Stood slowly, leaving payment for his meal on the table. We dream plenty, usually about things that matter beyond impressive titles and inherited wealth. Such as, the Draconian's voice dropped to a purr that somehow managed to sound threatening. Helping people who need it, fixing things that are broken, building something better than what we inherited, shouldered his kit bag. Simple concepts, really, though I suppose they might seem foreign to someone who's never had to work for anything. The cantina's atmosphere shifted, conversations stopping entirely as beings recognized the tension building between human and Draconian. Scales darkened toward crimson, a warning display that made several smaller species edge toward the exits. Careful, cargo hauler. Your species may pride itself on reckless bravery, but you are addressing. My family commands resources that could purchase your entire as a weekend retreat. Show proper respect, or learn why draconians have ruled the stars while humans still struggled with atmospheric flight. Paused at the edge of the cantina's main floor. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, a calculation that didn't match his humble appearance. Respect is earned, not inherited, and ruling isn't the same as leading. He left without another word, the cantina doors sliding shut behind him with a soft hiss. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before conversation slowly resumed, though many kept glancing towards table where she sat motionless, her amber eyes still fixed on the door through which the human had departed. "Insolent worm," she muttered, though her voice lacked the venom her words suggested. Something about the human's bearing had been unexpected. Cargo haulers typically showed appropriate deference when confronted by their superiors. This one had looked her in the eye like an equal, even while acknowledging the vast disparity in their circumstances. Her personal assistant, a nervous named, approached the table with obvious reluctance. "Shall I have security detain him, my lady? Public disrespect to your person could be construed as a diplomatic incident." "No's response surprised them both. "Let him go. I suspect this may prove more interesting than his appearance suggests." She had caught his name from the delivery confirmation he'd been reading, and something about the way he'd carried himself triggered memories from her diplomatic training. There had been a quality to his stillness that spoke of hidden depths, like a calm ocean that might conceal powerful currents beneath its surface. Made his way through the station's corridors toward the cargo bay where his ship waited. The Wanderer looked exactly as had described it, a battered freighter of human design, her hull by micrometeorites and hastily patched in a dozen places. She possessed none of the sleek elegance of draconian vessels or the imposing bulk of heavy cruisers. Instead, she looked like what she was, a working ship built by people who understood that function mattered more than form. As he completed his pre-flight checklist, found his thoughts returning to the encounter in the cantina. His reputation preceded her throughout this sector of space. Brilliant, ruthless, and possessed of the casual cruelty that came with absolute power. She collected rare artifacts and owned politicians the way others collected stamps. Her family's influence extended across dozens of systems, built on centuries of careful alliance building and strategic intimidation. What she didn't know, what very few beings in the galaxy knew, was that carried credentials that would have changed the entire dynamic of their conversation. Hidden beneath his cargo hauler's license and freight guild registration was authorization from the United Earth Colonial Administration's Emergency Response Division. Not the military, which operated under different protocols, but something more specialized and considerably more dangerous when properly motivated. The Emergency Response Division existed to handle situations that fell outside normal diplomatic channels. Natural disasters that required immediate aid regardless of political boundaries. Refugee crises that demanded action over committee meetings. The kind of messy, complicated problems that bureaucrats preferred to delegate to people with flexible morals and unlimited authority to do whatever worked. Had spent the last 5 years using his cover as a cargo hauler to monitor developing situations across the frontier. The Terran government wanted early warning about potential conflicts, humanitarian crises, and opportunities to demonstrate that humanity could be trusted with responsibilities beyond simple commerce. His ship's cargo holds contained more than freight space. Hidden compartments held medical supplies, emergency rations, and equipment that could establish communications or basic infrastructure anywhere in known space. The system job had been routine surveillance disguised as a delivery run, a mining dispute between two colonial factions that showed signs of escalating into something worse. Had delivered the requested minerals while also establishing contact with moderate voices on both sides, laying groundwork for negotiations that might prevent the situation from exploding into open warfare. His encounter with represented an unexpected complication. The Draconian Empire maintained official neutrality in most human colonial disputes, but individual nobles often had their own interests in resource-rich systems. If decided to involve herself in the situation, it could turn a manageable local crisis into something that required military intervention. The Wanderer's engines warmed up with their characteristic rumble, a sound that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat over the years of traveling between stars. Plotted a course for the outer system, where he could activate secure communications equipment and file his report without electronic eavesdropping from station security. As his ship cleared the station's gravitational influence, detected another vessel matching his trajectory. The sleek lines of a draconian courier marked it as expensive transportation, the kind reserved for nobility who considered commercial passenger service beneath their dignity. Long-range sensors identified the pilot's biosignature as consistent with species and approximate mass. She was following him, which raised several concerning possibilities. Perhaps their confrontation had triggered suspicion about his true purpose at Nexus Prime. Perhaps she had recognized something in his manner that suggested hidden depths. Or perhaps she was simply bored and decided to amuse herself by harassing a cargo hauler who had dared to speak back to her. Adjusted his course slightly, angling toward a nearby asteroid field that would provide cover and multiple escape routes if the situation deteriorated. The Wanderer might look like scrap metal held together by determination and luck, but her engines had been carefully modified to provide performance that would surprise anyone who judged by appearances. The comm system chimed with an incoming transmission, hesitated for a moment before accepting the connection, wondering what new complications was about to introduce into his carefully planned mission. Still running cargo to nowhere in particular. Her voice carried the same aristocratic amusement from the cantina, though something in her tone suggested genuine curiosity rather than simple mockery. Still traveling on family money while pretending it represents personal achievement, replied, keeping his own voice level and professional. Though you might be surprised what I've achieved beyond the circumstances of my birth. There was a pause, filled only by the static of interstellar communication. I have a proposition for you, cargo hauler, something that might prove mutually beneficial. Checked his instruments, confirming that his ship's defensive systems were fully charged and that he maintained a clear path to jump coordinates if necessary. I'm listening. Not over open channels. There's a system marker about 6 light hours from our current position, uninhabited but with a stable star for reliable communication. Meet me there, and I'll explain what I have in mind. The connection closed before could respond, leaving him alone with the steady hum of his ship's systems, and a growing sense that his simple cargo hauling mission had just become significantly more complicated. Whatever game was playing, he suspected it would require all of his skills to navigate without compromising his real objectives or his cover identity. The asteroid field grew larger in his viewport as the Wanderer continued toward the rendezvous point, each tumbling rock a reminder that space held dangers beyond hostile aliens and political intrigue. Sometimes the greatest threat came from the unexpected, from plans that seemed straightforward, until reality introduced variables that no amount of preparation could anticipate. Began composing a coded message to his emergency response division handlers, knowing they would want immediate notification if a major draconian noble was involving herself in human colonial affairs. Whatever's proposition entailed, it would require careful consideration and probably authorization from people with much higher security clearances than a simple cargo hauler was supposed to possess. The rendezvous system hung in space like a forgotten jewel, its yellow star providing steady illumination for the 2 ships that drifted in careful formation near the outer planetary boundary. Had arrived first, using the time to run detailed scans of the system and confirm that no other vessels lurked behind asteroid clusters or within the magnetic interference of the gas giants. His courier ship matched his position with the fluid grace of someone born to 3-dimensional navigation. The Silver Talon possessed the kind of elegant functionality that marked draconian engineering at its finest. Every curve served both aesthetic and practical purposes, creating a vessel that could outrun most military craft while maintaining the luxury expected by nobility. Thank you for accepting my invitation. His transmission carried a warmth that hadn't been present in the cantina. I hope you'll forgive the dramatic circumstances. Privacy is a luxury that becomes precious when one's family name carries certain expectations. Kept his response neutral while his ship's passive sensors gathered detailed information about the Silver Talon's capabilities. You mentioned a proposition. I assume it involves more than discussing human shortcomings in interstellar cuisine. Much more, a pause filled with the subtle static of encrypted communication. Tell me, what do you know about the Helix Nebula mining crisis? The question struck like a physical blow, though he managed to keep his expression neutral for the benefit of the video pickup. The Helix situation represented exactly the kind of developing crisis that his emergency response division monitored with extreme interest. A colony of mixed species had established mining operations in the mineral-rich systems of the nebula, only to discover that their extraction activities were destabilizing the gravitational balance of an entire star cluster. The potential for catastrophe was enormous. If the mining continued unchecked, the resulting gravitational collapse could destroy inhabited systems across a significant portion of the local stellar group. But shutting down the operations would bankrupt thousands of colonists and potentially trigger a refugee crisis that would strain the resources of every nearby civilization. I know the basic situation, replied carefully. Multiple governments are trying to balance economic needs against long-term safety concerns, the kind of problem that makes politicians wish they'd chosen safer careers. An admirably diplomatic summary. His image appeared on his main viewer, her amber eyes bright with what might have been approval. The reality is somewhat more urgent. My family's intelligence networks suggest that certain parties are planning to resolve the crisis through military intervention rather than negotiation. The Defense Force has quietly mobilized 3 battle groups, ostensibly for training exercises in uninhabited systems. Felt his pulse accelerate while maintaining his outward calm. Battle groups represented serious firepower, the kind reserved for major conflicts or significant humanitarian disasters. If they were positioning near the Helix Nebula, it suggested that someone with considerable influence had decided that forced evacuation was preferable to continued negotiations. That's concerning news, he said, though I'm not sure how a cargo hauler figures into whatever solution you're contemplating. Because you're not actually a cargo hauler. Statement hung between them like an unexploded ordnance. Oh, you perform the job competently enough, but there are details that don't quite fit the profile. Your ship's engine signature suggests modifications that would cost more than most independent haulers earn in 5 years. Your navigation records show a pattern of deliveries to systems experiencing political instability. And your reaction just now to mention of the Helix crisis was that of someone already familiar with classified information. Weighed his options quickly. Denial would be pointless given evident intelligence-gathering capabilities. Admission could compromise his mission parameters and potentially expose other emergency response division operations. The middle path required careful navigation. Let's say you're correct about my background, he replied. Why would that interest someone in your position? The Draconian Empire has its own intelligence services, presumably more capable than whatever hypothetical organization might employ hypothetical cargo haulers. Because my hypothetical intelligence services are constrained by diplomatic protocols and political considerations. They cannot simply appear in crisis zones without triggering interstellar incidents. But a cargo hauler with emergency response credentials could access areas and information that remain closed to official investigators. The implications crystallized in his mind with uncomfortable clarity. Wasn't just aware of his real profession. She understood its operational parameters well enough to recognize its value for her own purposes. The question remained whether her interests aligned with his mission objectives or represented another complication in an already complex situation. Assuming such a person existed, said slowly, what kind of assistance would you be requesting? The kind that prevents unnecessary wars and saves innocent lives. Expression grew serious, the aristocratic amusement replaced by something harder and more focused. The battle groups aren't planning evacuation assistance. Their orders involve securing mineral extraction rights for certain corporate interests before the gravitational instability forces system-wide abandonment. That would be, paused, running calculations in his head. Criminally irresponsible doesn't begin to cover it. If they continue extraction while the gravitational matrix is unstable, the collapse could propagate across multiple star systems. We're talking about potential casualties in the hundreds of millions. Precisely, which is why certain parties prefer military solutions that remove inconvenient voices from the decision-making process. Manipulated controls outside the video pickup's range, and its communication board chimed with incoming data. I'm transmitting detailed intelligence on the deployment, including classified tactical plans and rules of engagement. reviewed the data streams as they populated his displays, his expression growing grimmer with each new revelation. The operation was larger and more aggressive than anyone in the Emergency Response Division had suspected. Multiple battle groups, corporate mining vessels, and what appeared to be private security forces contracted from various mercenary organizations. "This intelligence," he began, then stopped as the full implications became clear. "This represents a massive breach of operational security. How did your family obtain classified military planning documents?" "The Draconian Empire has maintained neutrality in most galactic conflicts by ensuring we understand all parties' actual intentions rather than their public statements." Smile contained no humor. "My family's survival over the centuries has depended on knowing which way political winds will blow before the weather changes." Saved the intelligence data to his ship's secure storage systems while considering the ramifications. The information was genuine. His analysis protocols confirmed the authenticity markers and cross-referenced details that matched his own intelligence estimates. But accepting it would place him in debt to his family, a position that could complicate future operations. "What do you want in return?" he asked directly. "Prevent the catastrophe. Use whatever resources and authority your organization possesses to ensure that rational voices prevail over corporate interests and military convenience. The gravitational collapse of the helix systems would destabilize trade routes that my family has spent generations developing. So this is about protecting your economic interests. Among other things." The admission was surprisingly frank. "But also about preventing a humanitarian disaster that would dwarf anything seen in recent galactic history. Sometimes enlightened self-interest and moral imperatives align conveniently." Studied the tactical projections his computer generated from the intelligence data. The timeline was compressed. The battle groups were positioned to move within days rather than weeks. Any intervention would require immediate action and probably resources beyond what a single emergency response division operative could deploy independently. "Even assuming I could access appropriate authority levels," he said carefully, "stopping a three-battle group operation would require significant leverage. The kind of diplomatic pressure that takes time to develop and deploy effectively. Which is why I'm offering more than intelligence." Image leaned forward slightly, her expression intense. "My family maintains significant influence within the Galactic Commerce Consortium. We can ensure that certain economic pressures encourage more reasonable approaches to the helix situation. Economic warfare instead of military action. Economic incentives instead of military force," she corrected. "The corporations driving this operation respond to profit projections more readily than moral arguments. Demonstrate that their current plans will cost more than alternative approaches, and they'll discover sudden enthusiasm for negotiated solutions." Found himself impressed despite his reservations. His proposal represented sophisticated thinking that went beyond the crude stereotypes many species held about draconian nobility. She understood the complex interplay of forces that drove galactic politics and was willing to use her family's influence for outcomes that transcended simple profit maximization. "I'll need to consult with my superiors," he said finally. "This kind of coordination requires authorization levels above my current operational parameters." "Of course, though I should mention that time is a critical factor." Consulted displays outside the video pickup's range. "The forces are scheduled to begin their operation in 72 standard hours. Any intervention will need to be implemented before then to avoid direct military confrontation." The communication link remained active while composed a priority message to his emergency response division handlers. The coded transmission would take several hours to reach Earth through the quantum communication network, and the response might require additional time depending on how high up the authorization chain his request needed to travel. "There is one other consideration," said as he completed the message preparation. "My offer of assistance comes with personal risk. If my family's involvement in disrupting operations becomes public knowledge, it could trigger diplomatic complications that would affect our commercial interests across dozens of systems." "Why take that risk?" asked. "You could simply relocate your operations to other trade routes and avoid the entire crisis." "Because some things matter more than immediate profit calculations." For a moment, composed expression showed something vulnerable underneath. My education included detailed study of historical gravitational collapses, the Rigel system disaster 3 centuries ago, the Capella incident that destroyed 4 inhabited worlds. The death toll from the Helix collapse would exceed both combined. Found himself his initial assessment of character. The casual cruelty she displayed in the cantina might represent a protective facade rather than her true nature. Draconian nobility faced constant political pressures that rewarded the appearance of ruthless self-interest over evidence of moral concern. Assuming we can coordinate an effective intervention, he said, what happens afterward? Your family's involvement will be difficult to conceal completely, and there will be parties interested in revenge once the immediate crisis passes. My family has survived worse complications over the centuries. We adapt to changing circumstances rather than trying to control them absolutely. His confidence seemed genuine rather than boastful. Besides, success in preventing the Helix catastrophe would generate considerable goodwill among parties affected by aggression. Political capital has its own value in galactic commerce. The quantum communication array chimed softly, indicating that its message had achieved successful transmission to the Emergency Response Division's headquarters. Now came the waiting period, while bureaucrats and officials weighed the implications of coordinating with draconian nobility against the potential consequences of allowing the Helix situation to develop unchecked. I should have preliminary authorization within 12 hours, said. Full operational approval might take longer, depending on how many committees need to review the proposal. Understood, I'll maintain position in this system until we receive confirmation. Paused, then added something that sounded almost like an apology. I regret the manner of our initial encounter. The public persona required by my position sometimes obscures more important considerations. Apology accepted, though I have to admit, cargo hauler isn't my most natural role either. We all wear masks when circumstances require them. The communication link shifted to standby mode, leaving both ships drifting in the empty system while their crews waited for distant authorities to make decisions that could affect the lives of millions. Use the time to study the tactical data had provided, identifying potential intervention points and resource requirements for various contingency plans. The scale of the operation was sobering. 3 full battle groups represented enough firepower to overwhelm most planetary defense forces, supported by corporate mining vessels equipped with industrial-grade extraction equipment. The mercenary forces added an unpredictable element. Private security companies operated under different rules of engagement than regular military units, often with less concern for collateral damage. But the intelligence data also revealed weaknesses. The operation's complexity required precise coordination between multiple commands chains, creating potential points of failure if pressure could be applied at the right locations. The corporate sponsors had invested enormous resources in the project, making them vulnerable to economic countermeasures that threatened their profit projections. Most importantly, the entire operation depended on maintaining secrecy until the mining extraction reached irreversible momentum. Public awareness of the true risks would trigger political pressures that even the military would find difficult to ignore. Began drafting contingency plans for various intervention scenarios, knowing that his emergency response division handlers would expect detailed operational proposals rather than vague requests for assistance. The work helped pass time while also preparing him for whatever authorization or restrictions his superiors might impose on the collaborative effort with his family. The authorization came through faster than had expected, arriving as a priority burst transmission that filled his communication array with encrypted data streams. As he decoded the message, his expression shifted from cautious optimism to something approaching amazement. The Emergency Response Division hadn't just approved his collaboration with, they had elevated it to a priority alpha operation with nearly unlimited resource authorization. More surprising still was the identity of his operational coordinator. Admiral Sarah, the director of the Emergency Response Division and aunt, would personally oversee the intervention. Her message carried the weight of someone who had spent decades turning impossible situations into manageable problems through careful application of force, diplomacy, and occasionally creative interpretation of legal boundaries. The Helix situation represents exactly the kind of crisis our organization was created to address, her recorded message explained. Immediate action is required to prevent catastrophic loss of life, Political considerations are secondary to humanitarian imperatives, and you are authorized to use any methods necessary to achieve mission success. That includes full collaboration with your draconian contact and access to emergency response assets currently positioned throughout the sector. Forwarded the relevant portions to while maintaining operational security protocols. Her response came within minutes, carrying a note of what might have been relief mixed with professional respect. Your admiral has an impressive reputation in diplomatic circles, transmitted. Her intervention in the crisis 5 years ago prevented what could have become a sector-wide conflict. I look forward to working with someone of her caliber. The compliment carried additional weight because Draconians rarely expressed admiration for non-Draconian military leaders. Their culture valued strategic thinking and long-term planning above simple tactical competence, making Admiral's reputation significant in ways that extended beyond human political circles. The operational timeline has been compressed, replied. Admiral's task force will arrive at the Helix Nebula in 18 hours. Your family's economic pressure campaign will need to be coordinated with our direct intervention to maximize effectiveness. Already in motion, the Commerce Consortium received certain information about corporate practices this morning. By this time tomorrow, their primary mining contractors will face margin calls on several major projects. Financial pressure has a wonderful way of encouraging rational decision-making. Plotted a course toward the Helix Nebula while reviewing the tactical assets Admiral was bringing to the operation. The Emergency Response Division maintained several highly specialized vessels disguised as various civilian craft throughout known space. Within hours, cargo haulers, research vessels, and passenger liners would converge on the crisis zone, each carrying capabilities that would surprise anyone who judged by external appearances. The journey to the Helix systems took 14 hours at maximum sustainable velocity, giving time to study the detailed intelligence reports his aunt had transmitted. The situation was even more complex than initial data had suggested. The operation involved not just military forces and corporate miners, but also political factions within several colonial governments who stood to profit from resource extraction, regardless of long-term consequences. "We have a problem," transmission interrupted his review of gravitational stability projections. "My family's intelligence sources report that the battle groups have accelerated their timeline. They're moving into position 6 hours ahead of schedule." Checked his navigation displays and swore quietly in 3 different languages. Even at maximum velocity, the Emergency Response Task Force wouldn't reach the Helix systems before the forces began their operation. Any intervention would have to occur while military actions were already, significantly increasing the risk of direct confrontation. Admiral anticipated this possibility, he replied after consulting his operational briefings. Plan Bravo involves intervention during active operations rather than prevention before deployment, more dangerous but still viable. Define more dangerous in operational terms. We'll be trying to stop a military force while they're actively engaged in mining operations that could trigger gravitational collapse at any moment. Success requires precision timing and probably a significant amount of luck. The communication link carried only static for several seconds before responded. "My family didn't achieve our current position by avoiding calculated risks. We proceed as planned." The Helix Nebula appeared in its viewport as a swirl of colored gases and stellar debris, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Long-range sensors detected the gravitational anomalies that made the region so unstable. Massive stellar remnants whose interactions created the perfect conditions for catastrophic collapse if additional mass were removed from key equilibrium points. The forces had established positions throughout the inner systems, their battle groups providing security while mining vessels extracted materials from carefully selected asteroid clusters. On the surface, the operation appeared routine and professionally executed. Only detailed gravitational analysis revealed how close they were to triggering a cascade failure that would propagate across multiple star systems. "Wanderer, this is Admiral aboard the research vessel Deep Current. Please confirm your status and readiness for operational commencement." Smiled at hearing his aunt's voice, though her formal tone indicated that personal relationships were secondary to mission requirements. "Wanderer confirms operational readiness. All systems nominal and ready for Plan Bravo implementation." Excellent, Silver Talon. Please confirm your status and coordination with Draconian Commerce Authority assets. Silver Talon ready for economic intervention phase, replied with crisp professionalism. Commerce Consortium pressure campaign initiating in 30 minutes. Primary contractors should begin experiencing significant financial difficulties within 2 hours. The Emergency Response Task Force revealed itself gradually as Admiral's operational plan unfolded. The cargo hauler had identified as purely civilian suddenly deployed sensor arrays that marked it as an electronic warfare platform. A passenger liner began broadcasting on emergency frequencies, claiming distress and requesting immediate assistance. A research vessel transmitted detailed gravitational analysis to every communication system in the region, including open civilian channels that would reach news services within hours. Attention forces, Admiral's voice carried across all military communication frequencies. This is Admiral Sarah, United Earth Emergency Response Division. Your current mining operations are destabilizing gravitational equilibrium within this system cluster. Immediate cessation of extraction activities is required to prevent catastrophic collapse affecting multiple inhabited worlds. The response came from the battle group commander, his tone carrying the irritation of someone whose carefully planned operation was being interrupted by unexpected complications. Admiral, this is Fleet Captain. Your presence in this region lacks proper authorization and constitutes interference with legitimate commercial activities. Withdraw immediately or face consequences for violating operational sovereignty. Fleet Captain, I'm transmitting detailed gravitational analysis demonstrating the immediate danger posed by continued mining operations. Review the data, and you'll understand why emergency intervention protocols supersede normal diplomatic procedures. Monitored the tactical displays while Admiral's psychological pressure campaign developed. The research vessel's gravitational analysis was being broadcast to every communication system in the region, ensuring that within hours the galactic news services would carry detailed reports about potential catastrophe. The passenger liner's distress signals would trigger automatic emergency response protocols from multiple civilizations, bringing additional ships and observers to the crisis zone. Most importantly, economic warfare was beginning to show results. The primary mining contractors were receiving urgent communications from their financial institutions, demanding immediate collateral for loans that had been considered secure just hours earlier. Corporate executives were discovering that their carefully arranged profit projections were evaporating as market confidence in their operations collapsed. This is interesting, transmitted on a secure channel to an admiral. The battle group commander just received priority communications from his civilian contractors. They're requesting immediate reassessment of operational parameters due to unexpected financial complications. Fleet Captain's next transmission carried considerably less confidence than his initial response. Admiral, we require time to evaluate the gravitational data your research vessel has provided, temporarily suspending mining operations pending technical review. Acknowledged, Fleet Captain. Deep Current stands ready to provide additional analysis and technical assistance if required. The tactical situation stabilized as both sides maneuvered for advantage without direct confrontation. The forces maintained their positions but ceased extraction activities, while the Emergency Response Task Force gathered detailed intelligence about the gravitational instability and its potential consequences. This economic pressure campaign continued in the background, systematically undermining the financial foundations that supported the entire operation. Used the lull to deploy specialized monitoring equipment that would provide real-time gravitational analysis to Admiral's tactical planning. The work required him to approach within dangerous proximity of the unstable stellar remnants, but the Wanderer's modified engines and strengthened hull allowed her to operate in conditions that would destroy most civilian craft. Wanderer, be advised that your current position places you at significant risk if gravitational collapse occurs. Admiral's voice carried personal concern beneath professional warning. Understood, Admiral, but someone needs to provide close-range monitoring if we want to prevent that collapse from occurring. Continued his work, deploying sensor probes at carefully calculated positions throughout the danger zone. The mining activity has destabilized the equilibrium more than initial projections suggested. We're looking at potential cascade failure within 6 hours if extraction resumes. The news transformed the tactical situation from complicated to desperate. 6 hours provided barely enough time to evacuate the forces, let alone the civilian populations in nearby systems who would be affected by gravitational collapse. Fleet Captain, Admiral's next transmission carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed during emergencies. Updated gravitational analysis indicates immediate evacuation of all personnel from the inner system. The stability margin has been compromised beyond acceptable operational parameters. Admiral, my orders require completion of the mining operation regardless of theoretical risks. Corporate contracts specify performance penalties that exceed the cost of reasonable safety measures. Found himself impressed by Admiral's response, which managed to be simultaneously diplomatic and threatening. Fleet Captain, I'm declaring emergency humanitarian protocols under Galactic Convention Article 12. Continued operations in this region constitute endangerment of civilian populations across multiple star systems. Withdraw immediately or face intervention by whatever means necessary. The communication channel carried several minutes of silence while Fleet Captain presumably consulted with his superiors and corporate sponsors. When he finally responded, his tone suggested someone who had just received very bad news from multiple sources simultaneously. Admiral, we are experiencing unexpected complications with our operational funding. Corporate sponsors are requesting immediate reassessment of cost-benefit projections for continued mining activities. We will begin evacuation procedures within the hour. Acknowledged, Fleet Captain. Emergency response assets stand ready to provide evacuation assistance if required. Monitored the withdrawal while maintaining his gravitational surveillance network. The process was orderly but slow, hampered by the need to recover expensive mining equipment and the natural reluctance of corporate executives to abandon profitable operations without exhausting all alternatives. The economic pressure campaign succeeded beyond our projections, transmitted with satisfaction evident in her voice. Several major financial institutions have called in loans simultaneously, creating cascading liquidity problems for the mining contractors. They're facing bankruptcy proceedings if they don't immediately liquidate assets to meet margin requirements. Remind me never to get on your family's bad side, replied. That was surgical precision applied to corporate vulnerability points. We've had considerable practice over the centuries, though I admit this collaboration has been unusually satisfying. Most of our economic interventions serve purely commercial purposes rather than humanitarian goals. The evacuation proceeded without incident, though maintained his gravitational monitoring until the last mining vessel cleared the danger zone. His sensor network confirmed that the stellar remnants were beginning to as extraction activities ceased, though complete equilibrium would require several months to reestablish fully. Admiral's final transmission to Fleet Captain was a masterpiece of diplomatic courtesy, concealing absolute determination. Fleet Captain, thank you for your cooperation in resolving this crisis. The Emergency Response Division will maintain monitoring assets in this region to ensure continued stability. Any future operations in the Helix systems should include detailed gravitational impact assessments to prevent similar complications. The implied threat was clear. Any attempt to resume mining operations would be met with immediate intervention backed by detailed intelligence about intentions and capabilities. As the crisis resolution entered its final phase, found himself reflecting on the unexpected partnership that had made success possible. Intelligence and economic resources, combined with Admiral's operational expertise and emergency response capabilities, had created a force multiplier that transformed an impossible situation into a manageable problem. This has been an educational experience, transmitted as her silver talon moved to depart the system. Your Emergency Response Division operates with impressive efficiency when properly motivated. Your family's capabilities are equally impressive, replied. Though I have to ask, was the economic warfare capability something you developed for this specific operation, or do you maintain that level of financial influence routinely? Let's say that the Draconian Empire's neutrality requires certain capabilities for ensuring that conflicts resolve themselves without requiring direct military intervention. Economic pressure often proves more effective than weapons for changing minds. Admiral's final operational briefing summarized the mission's success while acknowledging the broader implications for future emergency response operations. The collaboration with Draconian intelligence assets had provided access to information and capabilities that would have taken months to develop independently. More importantly, it had demonstrated that human and non-human interests could align when properly coordinated. Wanderer, your performance during this operation has been exemplary. Admiral's personal message carried the warmth of family pride alongside professional recognition. The collaboration you initiated with our Draconian contact proved crucial to mission success. Consider yourself authorized for continued coordination with compatible non-human assets when circumstances warrant. Set course for Nexus Prime, where he would resume his cover identity as a cargo hauler while filing detailed reports about the operation's success. The return journey provided time to consider how the experience had changed his understanding of both his own capabilities and the complex political dynamics that shaped galactic civilization. The encounter with had begun as a simple case of aristocratic arrogance directed toward an apparently insignificant human. But beneath the surface mockery and casual cruelty lay intelligence, capability, and ultimately a moral compass that pointed toward protecting innocent lives regardless of species or political affiliation. Perhaps most surprisingly, the Draconian noble had demonstrated that inherited wealth and power could be used for purposes beyond simple self-interest. Her family's resources had been deployed to prevent catastrophe rather than profit from crisis, suggesting that even the most privileged individuals could choose to serve something greater than their immediate desires. As Nexus Prime grew larger in his viewport, composed a final message too, knowing that their paths would likely cross again in the complex web of galactic politics and humanitarian crises that defined his profession. "Thank you for an educational partnership," he transmitted. "Perhaps next time we meet, the conversation can begin with something more constructive than mutual mockery in a cantina." Her response arrived within minutes, carrying a warmth that would have surprised anyone who knew her only by reputation. "I look forward to future collaborations, though I confess the cantina encounter served a useful purpose. Sometimes the most productive partnerships begin with honest assessments of initial impressions." Laughed quietly as he guided the Wanderer toward her docking berth, already anticipating the detailed debriefing sessions that would follow his return. The galaxy remained a dangerous and complicated place, filled with political tensions and humanitarian crises that required careful navigation. But it also contained unexpected allies and possibilities for cooperation that transcended the simple categories of human and alien, noble and commoner, self-interest and moral duty. The next crisis would come soon enough, as they always did in a galaxy where different species competed for resources and political advantage. But when it arrived, would face it with new understanding of what could be accomplished when intelligent beings chose cooperation over conflict, and when inherited advantages were used to serve purposes beyond personal enrichment. Sometimes the most important victories weren't won through force of arms or diplomatic pressure, but through the simple recognition that enemies could become allies when they discovered shared values beneath surface differences. The human cargo hauler and the Draconian noble had found common ground in preventing catastrophe, proving that even the most unlikely partnerships could achieve remarkable results when properly motivated and skillfully executed.